Okay, this video is to go over your quarter 3 reading standards chart that you should be making an entry into every single day. One entry into at least one of the charts. Up first, I'm going to go over your unknown words chart. This is just like all of the other quarters that we have done that. Nothing has changed. You're going to put in the date that you make the entry. You're going to make sure you put in your unknown word, whatever word you came across in your book that you weren't sure of. Make sure you put the title of the book and a capital letter on that book title. You're going to do the sentence it was in. And I would encourage you at this point in 6th grade to use in the text it says, comma, quotation marks around your text, and very carefully and slowly copy it in letter by letter, capital letter where capital letters are, punctuation and spaces and where they belong, and then end with quotation marks. Your page number for sure, so that if you have to go back and look it up again, you're able to find it. And then you're going to look up your definition. Let me just go through what that should look like. So if you come across a word that you don't know, for example, in a passage you're reading, you come across the word steward, you would add it into your chart. Okay, you would put the date, you would put the word, you would pull out the sentence that it's from, making sure to have quotation marks at the beginning and end. And again, by this point in 3rd quarter, you would have in the text it says. You would put the page number it's on, and then we would have to look up a definition. So what we do is we go to a dictionary website like dictionary.com, merriam-webster.com, not just Google, but a dictionary website. You would search the word you were looking for, and then there's probably going to be 3, 4, 5, maybe even up to 10 different definitions. This is where you're going to have to read through the different definitions and find the one that fits the word the way it's used in your sentence. Okay? So we would go back to your sentence. We would see, all right, which definition fits. We would mentally cross out the ones that don't work, and we would look at the definition that does work. So the way the word steward is used in this sentence fits with this definition. You can copy and paste it right into the box. You might need to change your formatting a little bit. Maybe it had a bullet or a number and you just would backspace and delete that. You might need to shrink your font. If like the font was size 20, you don't want size 20, you would put it back to like a 10 or 11 or 12 size font, just so it fits your box. Okay? That is the unknown words chart. Again, whoopsie, not too different from what we've done. You need at least 5 in this chart, but probably your unknown words, you're going to have the most entries in, because you're going to put entries in anytime you come across a word you don't know. We want this to be a habit you're developing, as if you're reading and you have a word you don't know, you don't know the meaning of, just take a second and look it up, okay? You don't want to keep reading if you don't know what it means. All right, the analyzing character chart is again staying the same. You would put your date, the title of the book it's from with a capital letter on the title, character name with a capital letter on the character's name, and then you might put the character trait first, or you might wait to put your character trait until you go in and find good text evidence that shows that character trait. So let me just remind you of what that's going to look like. So as you are going through your book, you might be reading a passage. You might see some evidence that shows a certain kind of character trait for your character. And just remember, under class resources, you're going to have that character traits resource file that you can always look up some examples of character traits, or you can just do a Google search of a character traits chart just to get some more ideas. We want to try and stay away from just feeling words. So try to have it be, if it's a feeling word, it should be a feeling word that describes how they act over a period of time, not just in that moment, okay? For our character, Mia, the example that we had in this passage showed that she was acting with an impatient character trait. She was being impatient there. So if we fill this out, we'd put the date, the book title, the character name, the character trait, and then we would go ahead and we would we would type in, you're not going to copy and paste, you're going to type in the direct quote taken from the book, copied exactly with correct spelling, punctuation, capital, and quotation marks. And guys, it's right up here. If you don't remember all those things, I keep it right at the top of the chart so that you can easily remember. And like always, when we cite text, we're going to say in the text it says, or some variation of that. I don't care if you use that exact wording, but you do need to use a transition phrase and you do need to use quotation marks. So the last thing you're going to do is find the text evidence that shows that character trait. So any adult who says the words "don't touch" to a kid should know it's an open invitation to touch it. So that's showing her mom asked her to wait. She decided to not wait. Okay, so we would say Mia was impatient when her mom asked her to wait to make a new key. In the text it says, comma, quote, any adult who says the words "don't touch" to a kid should know it's an open invitation to touch it. So that is how you would fill out that chart. Okay, up next is the analyzing setting chart. So in our deep study of character unit a few months ago, we analyzed the difference between character details and setting details. And I just want to make sure that your entries that you're putting in the evidence section of your chart, that you are focusing on setting details, details that describe the location or the place. So I'll give you an example here. If you were to put the date, if you were to put the book title, and let's say you were naming the setting of your story. Now, this is just the name of the location goes under setting of the story. So you could say on a boat, whoops, that's a bit, on a boat in the middle of the ocean. Okay, you can clearly picture that setting. I'm very specific there with where they are. And then over here in the evidence box, you are not just naming the setting. So if your text evidence looks like this, in the text it says, Isabel sat nervously on the boat. She didn't know what was to come when she arrived tomorrow. Okay, that names the setting, but it actually doesn't give any details that describe the setting at all. So this would be an example of not good text evidence to describe the setting. Now, if it said, Isabel sat nervously on the boat, she looked over in the corner where all of the life jackets were piled. She saw the water filling the bottom of the rickety boat as the giant waves splashed over the side. Now I've named the setting as she's on a boat in the middle of the ocean over here, but in my evidence box, I have very clearly picked out text evidence that describes what you would see in that setting. So I know she's on the boat. I know there's life jackets piled in the one corner of the boat. I know that there's water filling the bottom of the boat, so I can picture that. It's been described as a rickety boat, which means it's kind of like in bad shape and falling apart. And then I can even picture the ocean waves being really huge and splashing big waves over the side into the boat. So now you're really able to picture that setting. So there's a big difference between the first piece of evidence I tried to use that did not describe the setting, it only named it, and the second piece of evidence where I clearly have a full picture. So we don't want to pick evidence that only names the setting. We want to pick evidence that fully describes what you would see in that setting. Okay. Next up is our figurative language chart. So again, this part hasn't changed. You would have the date, the book it is from, your descriptive language is being pulled directly from the text. So again, I put these directions right here at the top in red so that if you ever forget that you need to do it, it's right there as a reminder. You have to copy it exactly. It should have a lead-in transition phrase like in the text it says. And then in this box, you're going to explain what the phrase means. So let me pull up an example of that for you. Okay. So this is that chart. And remember, we're talking about pulling out examples like this, where you would put the date, you would put the book title, in the text it says, and then you would pull out that figurative language, those words, those really amazing words that the author uses, where the meaning is not literal. The meaning is something different than what the words say. So it was Jesse who finally pushed me to apply, would be the figurative language. But there's a part of that sentence that is the actual figurative language. So I want you to pull out just the part that's the figurative language. So, for example, in It Was Jesse Who Finally Pushed Me to Apply, the only part that's really figurative language is the pushed me to apply part. So the phrase pushed me to apply really means Jesse encouraged me or encouraged her to apply. So they give you the figurative language that you're pulling out of your book, and you just have to explain what the figurative language actually means. Okay? All right. And then the last chart is the biggest difference. Okay? This is the significant events chart, but if you notice, it does not look anything like the chart you've seen in the past, and the directions are different. So it says you have to fill out one of these for each book you finish. So if you are bringing up a book to check back in, you would need to make sure that you are filling out this chart first. So I will say to you when you bring it in to check into my library, have you filled out a plot chart for this? If you have not filled out every single box from the book title all the way down to the resolution, I will say you cannot check your book back in yet. You have to fill out a full chart for every book, okay? Now, what you would do first is, and I'll have you do this today, you would write your book title in this blue row, okay, next to book number 1. You would write your book title. Then we have the exposition box, which is your character setting any background information. So you would describe your main character. Brian is my main character. He is a young boy in elementary school, because they don't come out and say his age, but I know that from reading the story that I can describe him that way. And I know he is very shy and doesn't have any friends, right? Describing the setting, I would say Mrs. Carlotti's class in an elementary school. I do not need text evidence here. I do not need setting details. You are just going to give me a description so I know where they are. Okay? Describe any background information you need to know. Brian has no friends and is always left out of his classmates' get-togethers. Okay? So that's important to the story. So then if you're going to fill out your conflict row, which is telling what the main conflict in the story is and who it's between. So the main conflict is that the other kids are mean to Brian. He has no friends. Who's the protagonist? Brian is. Who are the antagonists? The other kids who ignore him. So that's how you would fill out the conflict row. Okay? Now, rising action. If I was just reading a picture book, I would maybe have 3 rising action events. But some of you are reading books that are 150, 200, 300 pages long, maybe more. Do you think you're only going to have 3 rising action events? You are probably going to have many more than that. Rising action events, you're going to decide what goes here based on how we used to pick out significant events. Remember how we picked this out? So anything that really stands out to you, if it's a big event or situation taking place, If the character is going through something that really brings out a strong emotion or feeling, that's a clue that it's a significant event. When your main character experiences a big problem, when an event happens that's affecting the other parts of the story, you're not going to do when a big problem is solved, because actually that will come later in your plot chart. But any of those kinds of things are going to go in this rising action chart. And if you have more than 3, which you will, you would just hit enter after you type in 3 and make 4. If you have more than 4, you would hit enter and do 5. So you just want to make sure every big event from your book is fitting into this rising action event up until you hit your climax. Make sure that it's the biggest event of the story where the story takes a drastic turn. Now, you might not know what your climax is until you finish your book. So you might need to do all your rising action events, and maybe when you finish your book, you're like, oh, I put that event in my rising action, but now that I've finished, I think that was my climax. Okay, because then once you know how the story ends, you're able to kind of figure it out. So then you would figure out what was the falling action, what was the resolution. Okay, and for every book you have, there's a new plot chart. So this one's totally different. So book number 2, you would write your book title here, okay, and fill it out for that book too. Now, what I'm going to have you practice doing is, let's go ahead. If you read more than 2 books, which many of you will this quarter, you're going to copy this entire empty chart. You guys can do it right now. Control-C copy. And then you're going to go right below that chart and you're going to hit Control-V. And you are going to put in, here's your book 2 chart. You're going to put in a third chart and change that book 2 to book 3. Okay? And then let's say you read 3 books and you need a book 4 chart. You would just do that again. You would copy and paste the book 3 chart. That would become, you would change it to book 4. So every book you read has to have one of these charts filled out. Okay? So this is the quarter 3 daily reading standards chart. This will be due at the end of this quarter. Can't find where my thing is to shut it off. Usually it's over here in the corner. Was it recording? Tell me it was recording. Was it recording or no? Guys, I don't know if it was recording. That was the old one. I did that in my last class. Oh, no. Did everybody fill that out? Yes, everybody's. Oh, there it is.